to another episode of Reasonably Tactical. We've been off air for a few weeks, a lot going on, and I do mean a lot has been going on. And none of this stuff has been recent either. What I'm referring to is the Israel-Palestinian conflict that's been going on, heated up on October 7th, 2023, and we'd like to dive in a little deeper because a lot of people think that this is just something new. But you got some good insight on it, though.
Yeah, and it's, everybody I talk to, and everybody asks questions about it. They're like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think? And it's, Americans are horrible at history, man. We're so spun up in the right now and what's going on, and then we defer to our phone real quick, what social media tells us, and there's a whole ton of information from everybody, and it's getting to the facts of how did we get where we are today. So for those of you that live in a hole and don't know what happened, October 7th, Palestinian, Iranian-backed group, Shia militant group, Hamas, conducted rocket attacks into Israel. Hours later, Hamas ground forces broke through the border, attacking Israeli communities, killing more than 1,300 and taking more than 200 women and children hostage. Then you had the paraglider attack.
Right.
Into a music festival, killing more Israeli, Christian, and Westerners.
That was what I think threw everyone off was the whole paraglider attack. I mean, that just came out of nowhere. We've never seen anything really like that before against civilians, have we?
True, but it's paragliders are nothing new. I mean, we've used them going all the way back into early 1900s, World War II. We had paragliders, so it's like, why not use something? And that's what we're seeing. Once again, as Americans, we have this fascination with technology and everything. But guess what? Dumbed down sticks and stones tactics always will overcome them. You look at Operation Anaconda, with billion-dollar satellites looking down and telling people there's nobody in Shalikat, and it's all they had was simple canvas blankets that they threw over their anti-aircraft guns, and it fooled these billion-dollar satellites or planes flying over. But the guys on the ground from AFO were able to identify them and fortunately, prevent even more catastrophic operation. But to understand what's going on in Israel, it's another thing too. Is there's so much information about it's Palestinians' land and Palestinian. Look, there's no such thing as Palestinian people. It's a made-up thing in the late 1900s that came to fruition. The area known as Palestine is mainly where Jordan is right now.
Right.
And so to understand this, you got to go back to World War I. In the whole history of Israeli-Arab conflicts.
Well, I'll even stop you there. You go back to the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
You go back to biblical times. If you think about it, all the land that we're talking about here has been thrown around between this group, that group. It was the Romans' land for a while too.
The
it
Romans,
was everybody.
The Greeks, everybody's controlled it at some point.
And that's what I kind of have always, being a bit of a history guy myself, have found to be a little interesting is that here we are discussing this as if it's a fairly new concept.
No, it's been
it started,
a war zone since the dawn of man.
Right, and that's exactly it. It started long before the Balfour Declaration, and that's something that a lot of people are missing the point on. And there's the argument about what exactly makes up the Palestinian people. And do they exist? Absolutely they do. They live there,
right?
But we need to understand a little bit more historical context. So, Marty, I'm going to let you take the lead on this because you did a great job with this breakdown. Now, I'm just going to call this out because I like to give credit where credit is due. Marty does his homework. We don't just pull stuff out of our tailpipes. Sometimes we do. This time we didn't. We had to get this one right because, honestly, this is a heated discussion. And people are very emotional on both sides of it, and for good reason. Nobody likes to see innocent civilians killed. Nobody. Correct. So we need to do our diligence first before we brought this episode to you, which is why we took a little extra time. We wanted to make sure that we had things as, how do I put this, non-biased, but factually based on historical events. So Marty, take us away, sir.
So once again, we go back to World War I. 1915, the British Parliament releases that plan for the annexation of Palestine, which once again, this is the greater Jordan, Levant area is what on the maps back then. So you can't look at what we think of Palestine today, this little sliver of the West Bank or Gaza. This was a region, and this is the British Parliament. Into setting the stage for the Balfour Declaration and a national home for the Jewish people. 1916, the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Great Britain and France divide up the Arab lands from the Ottoman Empire. So remember, this is still part of the Ottoman Empire. This wasn't...
Let's talk about that for a hot second here. So around this time, you also had the whole Armenian thing that happened too, the whole Armenian genocide that was in the same thing from the Ottoman Empire. And very short diversion here, and you know this being in the Balkans. They were all Christian before the Ottoman Empire came through there. They weren't Muslim from the get-go. They were Christian for the most part. It was the expansion of the Ottoman Empire that brought Islam to them, just like we see here. So, Marty, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to give people some more context on the bigger picture. Right. So, go.
So then, 1919, Emir Faisal of Syria, so now we're talking a Muslim emir, outlines at the Paris Peace Conference argument for independent Arab nations post-Ottoman Empire. So part of that the Brits and the French were carving up should still be Arab nations. But he also supported, in turn, was willing to work that turning a Jewish national homeland in the Palestine, Jordan area. So here you have the emir of Syria, we need Arab nations, and we're willing to give, a Jewish state as well.
So this is the first discussion of a two-state solution, correct? Okay, correct. Sorry.
No, but that's important. 1919.
Right.
White Sox throwing the World Series. But
it still wasn't safe in that neighborhood, for the record.
1922, the League of Nations grants a British mandate over Palestine. Once again, when we say Palestine, it's that region under terms from the Balfour Declaration. 1929, we have the Hebron Massacre, 3 days of riots, dozens of Jews killed by Palestinians, the local Arabs to that area. 1936, Arab revolt against British rule in Palestine. 1939, World War II begins, the genocide of approximately 6 million Jews by Nazi Germany. 1948, Israel declared independence, May 14th. The Truman administration is the first to recognize the Israeli state. So once again, this is 1948, the first time America's even mentioned. Right. So for the people that blame America for this, no, this goes way before.
Goes back,
this is British and French colonialism. Right. They're the ones that drew the lines, not America. So for the people that try to throw America under the bus that we're responsible for this, here's the facts.
Right. This goes back. Nation. There's a historical precedence here. Sorry.
So after that, the Arab-Israeli war begins when 5 Arab nations invade Israel after their declaration. That lasts 10 months. 1949, Israel is admitted to the UN, signs the armistice with Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. 1950, Israel moves their capital from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Jordan then takes formal control of the West Bank. So once again, Jordan now has control over it.
Yes.
Not Israel. 1956, Egypt nationalizes the Suez Canal, cutting Israel off from shipping lanes. So Israel then in turn invades Sinai and Gaza and takes it fairly easily.
Right.
1957, Israel withdraws but maintains control over Gaza and Aqaba. 1964, the Palestinian Liberation Organization is founded.
That was Yasser Arafat and things later on became names. Okay.
Yep. 1967, the Six-Day War. Israel defeats Jordan, Syria, and Egypt. After they came after Israel. The UN calls on Israel to withdraw. They do. And the UN also calls for their neighbors to recognize the Jewish state.
Now, I want to stop you on something there, too. This is another important little detail that happened the year before. So there was a few things that led up to the Six-Day War. One of them was a 1966 incident where Israeli security forces were actually killed by a roadside bomb. So in retaliation and in investigation, Israel decided to go into a West Bank city. And that kind of helped cultivate what led to the Six-Day War. Was another incident that kind of was part of it. And see, and this is the thing. These aren't just the highlights. This isn't everything. There's so many little scrimmages that have been constantly taking place, even long before this.
Right. These are the major hit points that had a ripple effect.
Yep.
So 1972, the Palestinian Black September attacks Olympic Village in Munich, killing 11 Israeli athletes. 1973, the Yom Kippur War. Egypt and Syria attack Israel on a Jewish holiday, Yom Kippur. 1974, the UN recognizes the PLO as sole representative of Palestinians. 1978, Egypt and Israel agree to the Camp David Accords. 1979, Israel conducts complete withdrawal from Sinai, so it's back in Egyptian control. 1982, the PLO conducts attacks from southern Lebanon. Israel invades Lebanon, forcing PLO to withdraw. And at this point, Lebanese Hezbollah is founded. Another Iranian-backed group, another Shia militia group. So there's a common thread.
I was just going to say,
Iranians
this
are
is
pulling the strings on this stuff.
very similar to what we've seen, especially with the attacks that coincided with October 7th.
Right.
So continue.
So 1987, the first Intifada, which is the Palestinian uprising, occurs. Hamas is founded as an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, who's based out of Egypt. So the Muslim Brotherhood, political organization we saw in the Arab Spring, they took control, strict Islam.
Yes.
Any non-Sunni Muslim was persecuted, and it was a whole thing. And fortunately, they were taken out of control.
Yeah.
1988, Yasser Arafat proclaims Palestine to be an independent state at UN, recognizes Israel for the first time. So once again, we have Yasser Arafat, leader of the PLO, recognizing Israel in 1988.
And something to be clear about with Arafat, look into the guy's history. That's all I'll say. For him to do this is a big thing for him to recognize that based on his history as a fighter and things like that. So just keep that in mind. And please continue, because I'm going to add something after this next one here.
1993, Israel and the PLO agreed to the Oslo Accords to establish a peace process and two-state solution. Immediately, Hamas begins a series of suicide bombings in Israel.
Right, and this is another big thing here. So you had a few things that started, again, cultivating and brewing. This is when Yitzhak Rabin was in power as prime minister at this time, and he was a big fan of these Oslo Accords. He, in fact, championed them to the Israeli people. Now, there has been, and I know this is going to get brought up for anyone that is talking about. What's his name? Netanyahu. And at the time, Netanyahu was opposition to Yitzhak Rabin. Netanyahu wanted a powerful Israeli state, and rightfully so, because he had enemies all around him. So people will say, oh, well, his far-right rhetoric would push people to do bad things. I don't think that's necessarily the case per se. Yes, he was certainly opposition to Yitzhak Rabin's way of doing things. And unfortunately, on November 4th, 1995, Yitzhak Rabin was, in fact, assassinated. But I don't believe that correlation equals causation. So just keep that in mind as we're going through this list here. I think we could be critical of certain things, absolutely, but we're not going to be. We're just going to try to keep it as factual and as timeline as possible. So Marty, please.
All right. So then in 2000, President Clinton attempts the Middle East Peace Summit at Camp David, but fails. Israel Prime Minister Ariel Sharon visits the Temple Mount. Hamas begins the second Intifada. Just because the Prime Minister visited the Temple Mount, they took that as a slight. 2005, Israel unilaterally disengages from the Gaza Strip. So that means Israel, on their own accord, withdrew from the Gaza Strip and dismantled Israeli settlements. So once again, Israel is the one that's withdrawing, taking back their settlements. 2006, Hamas wins legislative elections. So the Palestinians held an election and handed power over to Hamas. Just think about that.
And just going to stop you there. You guys, regardless of what the Gen Z view is of it, just look at the history starting in 1987 and Hamas's charter. That's all I got to say. Everything that you need to know about the foundation of the organization is there. Go ahead, Marty.
So as a result, multiple nations sanction the Hamas government. Israel goes to war with Lebanon after a series of Hezbollah attacks. 2007, Hamas takes control of the Gaza Strip after destroying the Palestinian Fatah. Egypt and Israel. So Egypt, once again, big, strong Arab nation, and Israel together impose a blockade on Gaza. So once again, this isn't a Israel versus Arab thing. It's other people in the region are like, yeah, this is a problem. 2008, Egypt and Israel together decide to impose an indefinite blockade on Gaza. 2009, the UN passes resolution on Gaza and presents findings of human rights violations that have occurred from the Hamas government. 2012, coalition of Palestinian militants launched rocket attacks into Israel. Response is an 8-day operation into Gaza, resulting in killing of Hamas military chief Ahmad Jabari. 2013, Secretary of State John Kerry attempts to restart peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. 2014, 3 Israeli teenagers kidnapped and murdered in the West Bank. Protests and rocket attacks from Gaza. Israel launches Operation Protective Edge, ends after 50 days through Egyptian mediation.
I want to point this out. Again, Egypt trying to put some water on this fire. This is big. So this isn't about Muslim versus Jew, guys. This is strictly about trying to make things work in this region. So
Right. 2019, President Trump established the Abraham Accords, normalizes relations between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco. Like, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge.
that, and you know, it's funny. I heard people actually criticize the Abraham Accords, saying, "Oh, well, it just made things worse." I'm like, no, it didn't.
No.
It brought things. And this is what I don't understand. And I'm not going to get too much on my soapbox here, people. So bear with me here. But I don't understand where people sit here and all of a sudden, just based on a few Facebook or social media posts, they become experts in geopolitical conflict.
Right.
And they think they know absolutely everything. Or they try to equate one battle to another battle. And they're not the same. And you know this being
we're
a
gonna
fighter
get to
yourself.
that here
Yeah.
going forward. But all right, 2022, tensions renew from Palestinian rocket attacks across Israeli cities, resulting in Israeli raids into the West Bank. 2023 of January, Palestinian gunmen attacks East Jerusalem synagogue. Israeli forces conduct raids into Jenin. In response to rising violence, Israel deploys gunships for the first time since the Second Intifada. Hamas gunmen attack a restaurant in Israeli territory the next day. Israel continues counterterrorism raids into the West Bank throughout the summer. Then we saw what happened in October.
Right.
So that brings us up to speed, going from World War I
Yes.
to this fall of what's happened. And the common thread there is every conflict that's happened, Israel was attacked first.
Right.
They have not been the aggressors. They are attacked first by other Arab nations, by terrorist organizations. And obviously, early on, it was Jordan, Syria,
Right.
Lebanon, Egypt. You know, they were the ones attacking. But as we saw, relations started to normalize with them, you know, in the 70s, 80s. But at the same time, that's when Ayatollah took control of Iran in 79. And everyone knows Iran controls Hamas and Hezbollah.
Well, let's talk about the whole power, handing over the power to the Ayatollah in 79. You have a little bit more insight on that. For those that may not understand what that actually meant, what did that pretty much do for that region by doing that?
Oh, it completely uprooted the balance of power in there. Because, the Shah wasn't exactly perfect. No leader is. But he was at least willing to deal with other countries. The Ayatollah took a hard, strict Shia, will regain the Persian Empire type mentality. And we saw the Iraq-Iran war,
Right.
where, insane amount of soldiers from both sides were killed. That sparked the export of terrorism with Hezbollah, Hamas, throughout the region.
Yeah.
Iran founded the terrorism what we know today, with kidnappings, with plane hijackings. That was all an export of Iran.
Right. And that's something, too, that I think a lot of people took exception with Obama when the whole money transfer for hostages kind of took place and it was claimed that it was money we owed them. I mean, do you think stuff like that played into that, too?
Oh, definitely. And, we look at early on, they're in Lebanon, where it was the same thing, where you look at history, and there's all kinds of books out there you can read about it, where these Iranian-backed militias learned that they could kidnap American citizens, people from embassy, and we would pay them off.
Yeah.
In hindsight's 2020, if we would have taken a hard stance when the Ayatollah took charge. If we would have gone to Saddam Hussein and said, "Hey, Saddam, we're going to help you in this war. We're gonna help you take back, what they've done. We're going to help you topple the Ayatollah. We want a base in Basra. We want a base in Baghdad. We want a base up in Erbil." Just think how different the world would look right now. Like Saddam would have never,
right.
He would have never invaded Kuwait.
Exactly.
He would never, gassed the Kurds. He would have never, it would have been a completely different. If we would have taken a hard stance back then.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible. So that's an alternate reality that is really interesting there, because basically what you're saying, and if I'm understanding you correctly, that had we have courted a man like Saddam earlier, kind of fed his ego just a little bit, showed that we were
taking control of him.
Control of him, right. That's what I'm saying. Like we've done in other situations. Let's just be honest. We've done it. We all done it. Every government does that in some form or another. You work with your neighbors, air quotations. And the idea is that, wow, I never even thought of that possible scenario. So going to where we're at today, which is, what are we, November 30th right now? So they've been going back and forth with operations into Gaza. It has been a firestorm of political propaganda.
Oh, it's insane. So the propaganda war is crazy. And one of the first things we heard was, people claiming this cash we gave to Iran because the current administration's trying to renew the nuclear deals.
Right.
Well, there you go. And the immediate response was, no, there's no way that cash was used. But you got to think about it. Anybody that's worked in corporate America or the military or any type of government with a body that has a budget, that budget's coming. So the Iranian-backed militias know, boom, we just got, Quds Force, the IRGC, just got a check for $400 billion. We want a cut of it. How are you going to get a cut of that? You're going to make a major act to show, hey, we are the militia you want to back.
Yeah.
So it's motivation to conduct attacks, so then you get resources. Right. And that's how this works through the proxy militias.
And let's go down that rabbit hole here, and let's talk about that with the militias, because here's the thing that was interesting, and it was brought up to me by a few colleagues actually today, in fact, this morning, knowing that we were doing this episode. They said, boy, isn't it interesting how we had this huge attack that was, killing thousands of people, hostages, things like that. He goes, and all of a sudden, Iran just kind of pulled back a little bit. And now it's just this kind of internal thing yet again. I mean, I know there's still some stuff going on between Lebanon on the border that I was hearing about.
No, there's tons of stuff going on through the region.
Okay.
I mean, look at all the Houthis. All these Iranian-backed militias are still conducting attacks on U.S. forces, even the Shia militia inside of Iraq.
No, I'm talking about specifically in the Israeli communities and things like that. I mean, you're like that big surge that we saw on the 7th. It wasn't it's not like it's still continuing like that.
Oh,
correct?
it's because they're being spanked right now.
Right.
Because Israel said, all right, gloves are off. We're striking back. And
Gotcha.
They're on the run.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's where they've gone back underground.
Because I didn't know if you were inferring.
No, they don't have the capability to do a head-on-head ground conflict like that. They go right back into hiding. So back to the propaganda war.
Please.
So the propaganda, we talk nuclear deals, money, it's all nonsense. There's a motivation there to conduct the attacks to get that money, to get the resources. So as history has shown, Islamic extremist organizations have proven to be masters of propaganda. This is going back 100 years, even before. You go back to the Crusades where the Ottomans went into Eastern Europe. They were just masters of propaganda. You look in modern time, because I know we have short attention spans. Look at in Pakistan. They would show the aftermath of a drone strikes where they have videos of children put there as human shields. But that's the thing is, these whack jobs, and it's hard for us here in America to comprehend this type of evil, where to protect themselves, they literally kidnap children from families,
right, and
fill their compounds with them. So in the event there is a strike after one of their leaders, they can twist it and be like, look, you killed all these children.
Right.
These are the sickos that put children and innocents in harm's way. That's a human rights violation right there. That's a war crime right there. It is what it is. But for some reason, we oh my God, these poor children, which it is, these poor children. Yeah. But it's these terrorist leaders that do this. You look at the ISIS video quality, back 2014, 15, where it was they had these you would see watching TV, these commercials of like, you know, the utopian society, kids on the playgrounds, and it was attracting Westerners. Like Westerners actually, these whack jobs believed they were converting to Islam and joining ISIS.
I want to talk to you about that because you told me this when we first met, what you were experiencing over there when confronting these people, how many Westerners you were finding.
It was insane because people don't understand that there's two ISISs. You had the Iraqi nationalists who, you know, the old Fedayeen guys that wanted to take back. And then you had the foreigners. And the foreigners were the whack jobs doing stuff. You know, like they had Jihadi John and, you know, like all those guys that were doing the beheadings and the really, really sick stuff. That was the Westerners that were flocking to this because it was these psychos' ways to live out their sickest dreams. And that's what we're seeing here in Hamas. Now, one thing I want to clarify really quick, though. Hamas is not ISIS. And I see that everywhere, and it's like, it's just ignorance. Yes, they're doing the same type of torture, mutilation type of tactics. But you have to understand Shia and Sunni.
Yes.
It's like the Bloods and the Crips.
Yes, that's a very good way. Yes.
They hate each other more than anybody. And ISIS was Sunni, Hamas, being Iranian-backed, or Shia. So, you know, that's why they have the white with the black stripe scarf, where, you know, ISIS and Sunnis wear the red striped scarf. Like, that's how you can tell the difference. You know, Bloods and Crips showing their colors. But Hamas is not ISIS, you know.
I think that's going to be the quote of the show, Bloods and Crips.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the best analogy I've heard. And for those watching that have really just only been getting your information from social media or third-party stuff, this is the real deal. I mean, he saw it firsthand when he was over there. And as you can see, this has gone on long before Marty and I were born and long before most people were born. Certainly before half a generation, most of Generation Z, their grandparents and parents. You know, it's kind of crazy.
So, you know, you look at the propaganda that's being used now, and the current footage that's showing, you know, Israeli indiscriminate killing of innocents. Dude, like, just Google it. A lot of it's stock footage, stock photos from Pakistan, from Syria, from Iraq, or from previous Israeli-Gazan conflicts, where it's like they're using old footage to be like, look, this just happened. And it's like, dude, you literally used that 10 years ago in the last conflict.
Right.
You know, like... But people aren't, they just take their quick little, oh my God, this is horrible.
Right.
Not understanding that it's not even happening.
Here's a bigger problem. So Adobe got its hand slapped recently because they were using AI generated footage from the conflict that never existed.
Right.
It was in their stock photos. So what happened was people were going through their photo library, and instead of it properly labeling this was AI generated, people were just assuming, oh my God, this is some very terrible stuff. And they were using it to put together stories and things like that to raise rah-rah this side versus rah-rah this side. And again, when you're dealing with geopolitical conflict, it's never good to pick a side because there's always problems. You should always pick the side of the innocent. It's my opinion,
and
at least.
You know, and that's a good point because bottom line, innocents on both sides are dying.
Yeah.
You know, it started with Hamas and the October 7th attacks, you know, taking women and children hostage. You know, killing people at music festivals, killing people in their homes. They didn't attack hardened Israeli defense force, you know, military targets. They attacked innocents. And yes, when you conduct large-scale military operations, especially against an organization that uses human shields, that intentionally, and we've seen this in previous excursions with Gaza and the West Bank, where they use UN hospitals, UN schools, and they cut holes in the roof so they could launch mortars out of them. So as soon as Israel retaliates, it's, oh, they destroyed this UN school. And it's like, no, you were using this as a military target. Israel is hitting military targets.
Yeah.
Innocents are going to be lost on both sides. We in America have a hard time dealing with it because we don't see that stuff here. And it's just like when it blows my mind with the media where they talk about, you know, Israel, you know, released these teenage political prisoners, and it's like, once again, it's pulling on our heartstrings here. It's words have meaning. Us, we view teenagers as school-aged people that play sports, that are in band. Where you go to these other countries, you go to South America, 13, 14, you're a military-age male. You are fighting age. I've seen it firsthand, where you got kids that you're like, dude, go play with toys where they got their chest rigged, their AK, and they're ready to fight. that's how the rest of the world works, and we as Americans can't. So the whole like teenager innocence, like it doesn't work. And even here in the States,
Yeah.
Look at gangs.
Yes.
Throughout the major cities where younger and younger 12-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 8-year-olds that they recruit to start off as surveillance. Then they start having running stuff. Then they have them do attacks, knowing that they're not going to get the stiff punishment as adults doing it. These organizations are doing the same thing, people.
Well, it's also, you think about what we used to see coming out of Africa with the militants. I mean, what were they,
Yeah.
like 8, 9, 10 years old, and they had a Kalashnikov that was bigger than them,
Right.
running around.
Right.
And this is, again, like you said, it's something that we in America become so desensitized by. We think we're so much more advanced than most people, and we forget that really, unfortunately, animalistic human behavior that is hardwired in a lot of people more so than others. And if you don't have a good upbringing to pull that out of somebody and almost domesticate an animal, throw a human in the wild, what happens? Like literally throw somebody in the wild. Look at those survival shows.
Oh, yeah.
How quickly does somebody that goes from sipping pumpkin spice lattes goes to slaughtering an animal with their bare hands? You know,
Or, look at, do it on Texas where
Yeah.
they have like the feral pig problem where it's like it's a matter of months and a domesticated pig will be completely feral and it's animalistic nature, like you said. So what are we seeing here in the U.S.? Like I said before, we've never had a strong stance against Iran. That's a government problem.
Yeah.
Like we need to admit Iran is bad, and we need to deal with it. Enough kicking the can down the road like we always have. I hit the points on that. I'm not going to beat a dead horse. But what we're seeing in major cities and universities is an atrocity.
that's disgusting, man. That is the most mind-numbing thing I have witnessed over the last several weeks.
And it's either the left has truly like infiltrated, indoctrinated academia, and then pays for these professional incitement with protests, or we as a nation are truly that dumb that we just ignore the truth. It could be a combination of both, but it's academia, what we're seeing on college campuses and majors, it's disgusting, and the anti-Semitism that comes with it. And these are the same people that talk to us about being open-minded and accepting everybody. Yet they're literally saying, kill an entire race.
And that's something that I was intrigued with. So I got into a discussion with somebody regarding anti-Semitism, and I had them try to define it in the best way possible, because we were hearing a lot of people saying, oh, this is anti-Semitism, this is anti-Semitism.
Well, it was anti-Semitic as long as it was neo-Nazis.
Yes.
But when you had Hollywood, when you had liberal media, when you had them, then it's okay. It's tolerable because, Israelis are the bad people. But otherwise, like anti-Semitism, only, skinheads
Right.
or Klan members.
And that's what doesn't make sense to me, is that there's this ridiculous double standard that goes into play here. You are doing something way worse than just saying a generalization about Jewish people and making a generalization about Jewish people.
Right.
You're going so far as to say Israel should not exist, and neither should the people from that region or living in that region. That is a harsh statement.
So here's a hard truth. Islam is not the tolerant religion that propaganda has made it out to be. And not every oppressed group is or can be connected. And that's what is happening right now. Recent example, I think it was about 2 months ago, it was all over the news, this Michigan City Council, 100% Muslim. They banned the Pride and LBT whatever flag.
Yeah.
Huge outroar. How could you do this? We helped you get elected. And they said, yeah, and we appreciate that, but our beliefs don't support those beliefs.
Right.
And people were like, oh, how can this be? And it's like, they don't even understand, like, just because somebody is transgender does not mean they're on the same
team as you.
As somebody that's gay, or somebody that's black, or somebody that's Muslim, or somebody, like, each group is still separate and has their, so trying to lump them all together like the left has and academia has, like, no, there's differences between each groups. Indigenous people versus Jewish people versus, whatever. They're separate groups with separate struggles. You can't lump them all together. And they have different beliefs. And sometimes those beliefs, and that's where, spending the amount of time I have in the Middle East, dude, they do not support the pride and the LGBT. No, they throw homosexuals off the roof. They stone them to death. They burn them to death. That's reality of what Islam teaches, and what's carried out. The tolerant, peace-loving Islam. I learned this going through language school. Literally, the word for black people in Arabic is abid, which means slave. This is the reality of this religion who the left and academia has tried, it's the religion of peace. That's propaganda.
Right.
That's propaganda. And you want to look at real open-minded religion, when you really take a deep breath and you look at the religions of Abraham in the book. Mm-hmm. Look what religion was the first to allow women to teach mass? Right. We saw women rabbis.
Right.
What was the first major religion to do gay weddings? It was done in synagogues. Mm-hmm. So when you really look at who's the open-minded ones, the Jewish people are actually really liberal and really supportive of all these other causes. So then to bite back at them, it's you don't even understand the reality of it.
I'm seeing that in the Jewish community, self-cannibalization, that it's they're almost cannibalizing themselves in a lot of ways. And I do want to touch on one thing about Islam and my experiences with Islam myself through my family and stuff like that. And one of the things that's interesting is, like you said, there's a difference between the different groups. And you probably noticed this in the Balkans, that the Muslims in the Balkans are more like Orthodox Christians, in a sense.
Yeah, culturally, definitely.
Yeah,
culturally.
And what's
and
weird,
they're Muslim in name, but they still like their sip of ouzo.
I call my
they still
wife's
like
family,
wine.
I call them Minos.
Right.
I say, you're Muslim in name only. Don't give me that crap.
Exactly.
I says, you had no choice but to convert when the Ottomans came. Dude,
right.
You did the right thing, man.
But culturally, same. Minus
absolutely.
the Mujahideen, but
yes. Oh yeah, that's a whole different group. That's a whole nother discussion.
Those are the crazies, yeah.
But the thing is that when you come around with every group, and that's the point that Marty is trying to make here, is you have these sects in every group, even here in America, which is becoming ridiculous now. We used to say we were a melting pot. Then we changed it to, well, we're more like a tossed salad. And what the fuck are we?
How this can play out. First, here in America and in the West, we need to accept, regardless of feelings or the past, Israel's right in this. They were the victim. They're striking back. And they have to eliminate this threat. Enough. We looked at 100 years of history here. Yeah. It's time that enough's enough. We need to denounce all of the anti-Semitism and prosecute any support for Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. Could you imagine people after 9/11 waving Al-Qaeda flags?
I want to bring that up. So Bin Laden's letter to America has been making its rounds now. And this is, talk about suspicious timing. It sure seems very odd that all of a sudden these influencers on TikTok, within less than 12 hours, were all talking about it. Millions of views on this. And all of a sudden we really got to rethink the way America does its foreign policy. Well, you got to rethink the way every country does foreign policy, really. But the truth is that now it's almost like we're seeing, well, maybe 9/11. And it's are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
3,000 people killed in a matter of hours.
That's exactly it.
And innocent people. Once again, the Pentagon military structure, but twin towers and everything else. No, innocent people.
Right.
Another thing, Congress needs to quit attaching items to aid. Israel and Ukraine are two separate conflicts. We saw this at Iraq and Afghanistan. Yeah. Two separate conflicts. Quit trying to lump Israel and Ukraine aid together. It needs to be addressed, funded, and resourced accordingly. Two separate conflicts. Lastly, the U.S. and its allies need to put pressure on Arab nations to finally address the Iranian agenda and put the Sunni-Shia conflict into their hands. We can't keep intervening because then it's Western influence and Christianity trying to take over. We need to put the hands into King Abdullah II of Jordan. Put pressure on the Egyptians to deal with the Iranian issue. This can only be resolved by them finally fighting it out, and will only fail if we think we can intervene again, or our allies can. We can support them, we can help train them, but it needs to be Sunni Shia need to come to a head. Let the Saudis fight it out with Iran, and enough of this proxy stuff that's spilling over into everybody else.
And you're right. And that's something I think that people miss in here is that America, as great as we are when it comes to being a mediator in conflict, we sometimes inadvertently make the conflict compounded. Because now we bring other facets into it too.
As we've shown, and people love to we failed in Afghanistan and Iraq. Here's where we failed. We went in there and met the objectives immediately. Look with Afghanistan, 500 dudes go in, kick Al-Qaeda out of the country, topple the Taliban regime. Boom, that's the win.
Yeah.
It's when everybody else wants to, we need to get in the fight, and all the do-gooders come in, and that's where all the money was wasted, building billion-dollar, diesel-powered power plants that it costs more to run than import from Tajikistan. But that's just one example. That's where all the waste comes in, and us trying to make a 5,000-year-old culture the same as ours. It doesn't happen. It can't happen. They have to want to change it. Same thing in Iraq. We went in and it was race to get Sunnis out of power, defeat the Baathists. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, we ignored the Shia and the Iranian problem. We knew by summer of 2003 this was going to be a problem.
Yeah.
And the higher-ups completely ignored it. Have clear-cut objectives for when we go into countries. And once we are complete, you guys have to rebuild your nation. That's not the military's job.
And I think right there, that's the best way to put it, is full circle on all of this. It all boils down to just knowing the facts, knowing the history of everything, and knowing what our role is. And you know what? You want to talk about helping innocent civilians on any side? Absolutely. Don't share propaganda. Share a helpline.
Right.
Share a number as to, hey, wait a minute, we can help these people. We're going to send aid. Aid
to refugee camps,
exactly.
Or the Red Cross, the Red Crescent, whatever.
Right.
That's how you support innocence. That's how you support and preserve that. Spreading misinformation online, going and graffitiing anti-Semitic nonsense on buildings, you're making matters worse, and you're bringing conflict here to our streets versus let them fight it out over there. They need to. Thousands of years in the making. They need to fight it out, but don't bring it to our streets here. So, hope you learned a little bit today. Hopefully, people take a deep breath, think a little clearer now. Send in your questions as always. Have a good one.